So Dustin, obviously, this is I think this is the first time in your career that you've been off for almost a full year. It's not quite a year. But how have you kind of treated this layoff? Have you been doing anything differently, or like how have you been using your time?
No, it's pretty much been the same. Most of the time I spent back home in Louisiana, but I have so many buddies who are pro fighters, amateur fighters, that I'm in the gym helping them for their fights and sharpening my skills as well. Had a lot of time to spend with my wife and daughter. That was nice. I've had a couple, maybe two, long layoffs between fights in the UFC in the past 10 years. But I stayed busy the whole time.
What was this kind of a product of? Was just not the right fight materializing, or?
I wish I could tell you. I mean, I've been asking the UFC for a fight the whole time. Nothing came together. I'm not sure, but we got one here next week.
Of course, okay. And you're coming off a busy year. It's not like you were doing nothing last year. You had three fights.
Three big ones.
That's a long, three big ones. Exactly. I mean, you had two fights against two finishes of Conor McGregor, and then the championship fight against Charles Oliveira. What does 2021 mean in your career, like in terms of like when you look back at it?
It was a huge year. Anytime you beat a guy of Conor McGregor's stature, in the combat sports world, it just elevates opportunities for yourself. Then obviously the title fight at the end of the year. It was a great year for me and my family. It was a great year, all the way around.
Now, your profile, of course, grew considerably last year because, I mean, not that people didn't know you, but once you fight Conor, it changes, especially if you fight him twice, right? Did that kind of alter your approach to your career at all now that you're kind of at this level, not just because of Conor, but you had that title fight too? So, like, where do you sit in terms of the way you want to approach your career going forward?
The same place I was at before, man. I'm taking just one fight at a time. I try not to look too far ahead. Nothing matters until after the next fight, whichever fight that is at the time. And here is November 12th, Madison Square Garden. And then, me and my team, my family, we assess after the fight, but that's all I'm locked on.
And yeah, you mentioned Madison Square Garden. You were supposed to fight here, I think just about 5 years ago. It didn't materialize, you and Nate Diaz. I think you had a hip injury. Is that right?
I have a hip injury for a while now, but Nate Diaz was giving the UFC trouble. They started offering me alternate replacement opponents, and then I decided to get the hip taken care of.
Okay, I get you. Okay, so, but obviously this is now a chance for you to go back and fight at the Garden. I mean, do you like that you get this second chance to fight at the arena, or does it not mean as much to you? I don't know.
No, it's a huge opportunity. The Garden is an iconic place throughout history for combat sports. The greats fought there. It's a milestone in my fight career that I want to be able to talk about in the future to my grandchildren, tell them I fought in Madison Square Garden, pay-per-view. It's a big deal. It's not a little thing to me. I'm taking this seriously.
Was that something like when they mentioned the date and the arena, did you get like a little bit more excited than maybe a typical like venue or whatever?
I've been fighting for a while. It's another fight, but I was happy where it was for sure.
But this is Michael Chandler. I mean, this is kind of a fight that a lot of people really thought kind of made a lot of sense for quite a while. And there was the whole kind of the dance around, on his end and whatever. And it was like, well, we figure out, are you guys going to fight or not? What interests you especially about this fight with Chandler?
It's a legacy fight for me. He's another former world champion. I have a list of world champions that I've defeated, and I plan on adding his name to that list. It's a legacy fight for me.
And how, like, when you're watching fights, like, because I don't know how much do you watch fights, by the way, in your free time? Like, do you like to catch all the fights, or do you kind of take a break?
No, I watch everything.
Okay, so you were watching his career like way back in Bellator and following it along.
Of course.
Is he someone that, like, because obviously you're in different organizations, do you ever think to yourself like, hey, it'd be fun to fight him, or like, here's how I might fight him? Do you ever watch those kind of things even with different organizations?
I mean, I don't, in the moment watching the fight, I probably don't think that, but subliminally it's there always. Everybody I see fight at 155 pounds, I feel like could be a potential opponent.
How do you feel about the style matchup between you and Chandler?
It depends how he fights. If he fights me like he fought Justin Gaethje, it's going to be a fight of the year type of fight. We'll see what happens. He's explosive, dangerous. He's the kind of fighter that gets me excited to fight. He brings it every time out. Anytime, like, fights that get me excited, the same fights that get the fans excited. Whenever you know there's two guys who's going to go in there and leave it all on the line, that's the fights I want to be part of.
Mm-hmm. Now, of course, there's a new champion now. Since the last time you fought the champion, it's Islam Makhachev. What did you think of his performance, by the way?
I mean, dominant. I didn't, of course I knew he can get the job done, but I didn't think he was going to go out there and do it that smoothly without taking damage or anything.
And, you've yet to compete against him, of course. So this potentially down the road could be a fresh matchup for you. I mean, how do you feel like the fact that there's a new champion there, not somebody that, holds a win over you? How does you feel that kind of affects your path to get back to that championship?
Obviously it's an opening for another title shot. Somebody who I haven't fought, somebody who needs new, opponents. I just have to replant that flag at the top of the mountain of the lightweight division.
Do you kind of feel motivated, especially because it has been a longer layoff, that maybe you need to kind of remind people who have short-term memories in the sport, like, hey, I'm still here?
That's every fight, man. Every fight you're proving yourself. So I wouldn't say that. Okay. As long as I know who I am going in.
I get you. And you've been making an impression on people who've been watching the sport since the first time you debuted in the UFC. Had Josh Grisby. I remember that fight. Josh was supposed to get the championship fight, and it didn't happen because Aldo got hurt. You step in and you beat him. What do you remember about especially that first experience competing in the UFC? Because it was a unique experience for any fighter. Yeah,
I remember the weight cut. It was the first time I ever went to 145 pounds. I was fighting at 155 pounds at the time in the WEC, and the UFC reached out to me. I wouldn't say it was short notice, but it was relatively short notice to prepare for a new weight class. And it was amazing, man. Going out there and getting that first win in the UFC showed me that I belonged competing with those guys. Even though we both came over from the WC, I got my hand raised under the UFC banner, at the MGM Grand. It was a big deal to me.
And it didn't go that way, but I mean, you beat the number one contender in theory. Did you kind of think to yourself, like, well, am I the number one contender now? Or,
I mean, I've been in the top. That was before we had rankings in the UFC.
Right.
But I've been in the top 10 for the past decade.
But I mean, even at that point, because it was so early in your career, you did beat that guy who was supposed to get the shot. Did you kind of think, oh, maybe this puts me like next in line? Or
no, I remember running into Sean Shelby after the fight in the casino, walking back to my room after the event, and asking him for more tough fights. I think at that time I was asking him for Leonard Garcia or somebody crazy who was going to be a fun matchup for me. I was just chasing fun fights.
Sure. And it was very young in your career. I know you had 10 or 11 fights at that point, I think. Not too many.
Yeah, if that as a pro, I might have been under, or around 10 fights.
Sure. Do you remember even further back? Like, do you remember your first experience watching mixed martial arts? Yeah,
for sure.
What was it like? What do you remember of it?
My first experience watching mixed martial arts was with my dad renting VHS VHS movies at a place where it was the adults only section in the back,
Yeah.
It was like the videos were by the porno videos and stuff. My dad would get Ken Shamrock VHS and watch him way back in the day. My dad was a wrestling fan.
Okay. So you got in kind of that blockbuster level, the way everybody used to watch with rent the tapes. Yeah. So let me ask you this too. When you're between fights, when you're not training, maybe the last year or so, when you weren't training specifically for a fight, where do you typically walk around at weight wise?
Close to 180, give or take, maybe high 70, 78 to 82, anywhere in between there.
Okay. So you're not one of these massive, lightweights that we kind of see. It sounds like this is kind of pretty much your weight class, right? This is where you'd prefer to be comfortably.
If there was a middle ground between 55 and 170, like if they had a 162 or something, I think that would be actually perfect for me. Because I can get down to 170 pounds dieting, before I really start cutting. That's where I'm at now, waking up. Yeah, I mean, I could touch 183, 184 if I'm on vacation for a week with my family or something like that, but it comes off quick. I would say I'm usually around high 70s, 180. So, and then I come out here, get in shape. I'm middle of camp. I'm like 174-ish, so 155 is a good fit, but it's not fun to get down to weight.
Sure. But it's better than 45 those days.
Oh yeah, I would never do that again.
What about on like a fight night? What do you typically walk into the cage at? Do you know?
It depends. Usually like 73s, 70, around there, 74 maybe.
What about like after you're done with the weight cut? What's the first meal that you kind of go to?
I mean, after the fight, then I could get crazy and
Oh, sure.
eat and stuff. But after the weight cut, it's still planned eating because I'm going to be fueled off of what I'm eating, on fight night. So that 24 hours between weigh-in and fight night, I have to be careful. It's usually quick digesting carbohydrates, white rice, potatoes, chicken, things like that.
And then what is that thing that you're going to after the fight? What's like the man, I got to have this.
I mean, we're fighting in New York. I got to get some pizza.
There you go. I can give you good spots. I know some good spots.
Right.
What's your favorite fight of yours from your regional days? You didn't have too many of them because you got to the WEC so young.
I've only fought 9 times outside of Zuffa.
Mm-hmm. Do you have like a favorite of those?
Favorite?
Deep cuts we're talking, right?
There's a Louisiana fighter named Rich Clemente. He also fought in the UFC. He put on a show in the Superdome. Actually, it might have been the first mixed martial arts event inside the Superdome. In New Orleans. And I fought a guy from Texas there, and it was a back and forth, pretty crazy fight. It might have been my 4th, 5th. I don't know exactly where it was on the amateur, but that was a crazy one. Just being in the Superdome, having my family and people there, it was crazy. That was a real, memorable fight for me.
Who in this sport do you most admire? It doesn't have to be a fellow fighter. I mean, it could be like a coach or someone even maybe you looked up to when you were coming up in the sport.
I've always put, there's a bunch of them, if it's like fighting style or the way that, the grit and guts that these guys show, there's a bunch of different lists. But like one I've always respected was George St. Pierre. I thought he did it right. I thought he kept it very professional, spoke well, fought well, and he was a true martial artist. That's what drew me to mixed martial arts from the beginning, is just like that purity of it.
Sure. And last question I have for you is, what is the coolest technique in combat sports?
Oh man, I don't know if I can narrow it down to one.
You can name a couple. That's all right. You can rattle a few off.
The coolest technique. I really love boxing. I love counterpunching. I love guys who have great timing and rhythm, but also respect the submission game. Guys in there like Islam who can go in there, not take any damage, put a guy down, finish the fight, walk away with no scratches, no bruises, no stitches. That's you got to respect that.